that Stephanie, isn't it?
Yeah, sure is.
So that's the problem. There's a little problem as chair, unless we,
Can we bump
We have
to the
quorum.
real estate?
Or we can, well, you gotta have readers.
is that all right to do?
Sorry,
To bump to real estate?
We've got a, see,
You got me and you.
we've got
At 25.
a quorum for the municipal board.
Okay. We'll do the municipal boards.
We'll tag it if she gets here. So, we're at the Municipal Boards and Committee meeting for today, August 12th, sorry, at 8:15. We have three recommendations, three different topics. The Code Enforcement Board recommendation from Sunny Marshall to appoint Nick Holzick, I think Brian, if that's correct, to a 3-year term as an alternate member beginning August 15th and ending August 14th. And then also for Code Enforcement, an appointment for Adam Russell to a 3-year term as an alternate member beginning August 15th and ending August 14th, 2025. Do you want to take these in unison, Mr. Mayor, or do you want to?
Well, and I'm short the utility appointment in this. Where are we at?
I thought you were recommending.
I have them.
So, that's Stefano.
Okay, I'm sorry, it's next, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Do
Okay.
you want to do all three of these at once? Or do
Yes,
you
ma'am, on the throat and code enforcement, yes.
Yes. And if you'll pronounce that name for me for our utility?
Well, I think it's Sauk.
Salk. To a
Sounds good to me.
3-year term beginning August 15th, 2022 and ending August 14th, 2025, filling the residential rate class outside the city of Lakeland limits seats. And the Historic Preservation Board, a recommendation from Matthew Lyons to appoint Michael Porter as a member to a 3-year term beginning August 15th, 2022 and ending August 14th, 2025. So I'll entertain a motion for the accept those recommendations.
So moved.
And I second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. For information, Affordable Housing Advisory Committee is looking for one member who is an employer within the jurisdiction. And also Community Redevelopment Area Advisory Board looking for 2 members who own property or a business or works in the Dixieland CRA district. With that being said, to note that for the public, we're finished and we can adjourn this meeting.
Okay, so our meeting is adjourned. So we'll wait 3 minutes, or do you want to go? We'll go.
I believe it's advertised to immediately occur after.
I love those.
Pretty much there anyway.
All right, so let's go ahead and we will do real estate, and that would be Chairman Music.
Good morning. We are now starting the meeting of the Real Estate and Transportation Committee. Commissioner McLeod and Chair Mike Music are present. We're waiting on Commissioner Reed. We have 2 items today. Number 1 is an agreement with Lakeland Town Center LLP for the lease office space for the Lakeland Town Center.
Yes, I'll take this one.
Take
Good
that.
morning. This is a lease for office space of about 2,877 square feet. That will actually be used by Lakeland Electric's meter services. Currently, the city leases about 20,000 square feet at Lakeland Town Center where it houses our training facility. And there's some movement going around. There's 3 Lakeland Electric offices at that location now that will be relocated because of the health stat clinic coming into that space and also civil service. So in taking a look at what to do with meter services basically has 25 employees that need to be housed along with 13 field trucks in the new space. What they occupy now is 4,200 square feet at $5,124 per month. So in looking at what to do and the most cost-effective option, the idea was city staff is looking at an additional space at the Lakeland Town Center. That's the 2,877 square feet, which actually represents a smaller space and a lesser lease amount per month. So this would be a 10-year initial term. It would be effective September 1st. Upon your approval, it also contains 2 additional 5-year renewal options upon mutual written agreement of the parties. The city does intend to do some remodeling work before they occupy that space to accommodate their needs. So the rent payment would be abated for a 4-month term, and rent would not start until January 1st, 2023. The rent payments would be a monthly rate of $2,877 a month. There's also an additional $599.38. That covers common area maintenance charges based on a pro rata square share of the square footage. So that makes the total rental cost $3,476.38 a month. Each year, the rent will be subject to a 3% increase or an adjustment with the CPI, whichever is greater. However, there is a cap on increases in rent amount of 5%. The total cost for FY23 is $31,287.42. That is included in Lakeland Electric's budget for FY23. The total estimated cost of the 10-year lease is $478,233.61. That would be subject to budget approval in subsequent years by the City Commission.
All right, thank you, Ramona. Any questions? Commissioner McLeod?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ramona, the date for the Health Stat Clinic to relocate there, when is that?
Corey Bush is here from Lakeland. Do you know when they're going to be moving?
So we'll have to vacate that property before they can move in. So in that process, we've met with the architect, and it's in design right now for the build-out that she mentioned. So as soon as that takes place, but that's going to be a couple months. We know how construction is. So but we have to vacate before they can move in. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I know, I'm ready to Searstown?
Yes,
Thank you.
exactly, sorry.
That's okay.
That's what everybody knows it by, but yes.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Where is HealthStat moving?
HealthStat is actually moving into the Lakeland Town
And
Center.
what goes in HealthStat's space?
That I'm not sure what is going.
They have a little rehab place.
There has been, and as part of this move, we have been evaluating some of our facilities, and that's been discussed even at a past commission meeting, and trying to determine where we're going to move different functions. And there's various opportunities for relocations, but we haven't landed on exactly who will move where just yet.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And
Accessory.
So I just have just kind of a generic question. I assume this is because we don't have space somewhere, right? We don't have a building somewhere to sit in, so we're paying somebody else to do this. This isn't just a, okay. All right. Well, okay, we have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I will second. All in favor?
Aye.
And aye, passes unanimously. Our second item, get back to it.
I have this item, this is a conveyance of an easement to Summit Broadband out at Parker Point Apartments. The commission should be familiar with this. The city owns property at 900 East Bella Vista Street, and essentially Green Mills, which is the management company that's developing that apartment complex, has negotiated a deal with Summit Broadband to provide service to those residents there, and they need an easement in order to do that. So we've negotiated this with them. It's about a 10-foot wide easement, about 56 feet long, right off of Bella Vista Street into the first structure there, and requesting approval for that.
Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we don't have to get into this now, but I would like to get an update on Summit and those follow-up discussions we talked about a few weeks ago, just kind of where things are. We don't have to dive into that in the committee meeting, but just for Sean, maybe an update when you can.
Agreed.
Okay.
So when we are looking at an easement, how do we come up with, do they look to us and say, hey, we need 10 feet, we need 6 feet, 3 feet? How do we come up with that?
Originally for this, they asked for a blanket easement over the whole site. We told them we couldn't do that. And we ended up landing on a 10-foot wide strip. But the easement document actually says that once they lay that conduit in the ground, they're going to provide an as-built to us. We'll amend the easement.
And that'll shrink the spot, but just gives them that flexibility.
Right.
No, interesting.
Okay. Okay, any other questions?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. And it is 8:26, and that is the end of our Real Estate and Transportation Committee.
Perfect. One of the things I haven't mentioned to you, Commissioner McLeod, earlier, but has been mentioned to me by a couple people along the way, is occasionally we ought to have a CRA update built into kind of what we're doing just so that we get, so the whole commission has more of a pulse, not related always to CRA items. And your summit comment might be to think about asking you about that. And which we could do at agenda studies, really, if you wanted to, with some interval, maybe following. So when you're doing your notes, the meeting, think about
What to bring back to the group. I like that. Because there are a lot of items, as you know, that are
You're a communications guy, and you love it.
Some of that, yeah.
Yes.
So I'll keep an eye on what would be useful to bring back to the commission.
So thank you for that.
That can help me with that too.
That gives us times in between, and then there's more of a pulse if we go on. Okay. All right, we will wait for 3 minutes, and we'll start our agenda study. Being on time, that's wonderful. So we start out with the airport update that Chris is going to provide, and it's a presentation, which we always look forward to. And then proclamation, we have one, which is, so we should probably take the S off of proclamations, which is the Line Worker Appreciation Day. Then we have the reports that we just went through on committee. Consent agenda includes only the, C1 as well, and 8C1, so one in utility. So let's go to that first. Miscellaneous reports. This is on emergency water, so we are 6C1.
Thank you, Mayor. I have this item, this is Jared Simpson from Legal. This is an agreement that has been in existence for quite some time, and it just happened to lapse. We didn't, some renewals were built into the agreement, and we just neglected to provide the notice of renewal. So because the original agreement contained some language about construction of the interconnect, we went ahead and cleaned that up and to reflect the current situation that this interconnect is in operation and active. And we're essentially trying to re-implement this agreement with the built-in renewals. And I think that's pretty much it. David Bayhan's here if you've got any technical questions about how this interconnect operates.
I think we know how the interconnect operates, or is there any problems with leaving that on consent from your perspective? Okay, great. And appreciate you cleaning up the language to get that done. And glad to have the interconnects and glad to have that construction done. All right, the utility.
Yeah, we have a continuing contract for electrical power engineering services. We do these every few years. These are typically 3-year agreements with 2 additional 1-year options of renewal. We went out for an RFQ. We received 20 responses from 20 companies. 11 of those were shortlisted that you see below. And again, these are for electrical power engineering services. This is a $0 contract. What you will see is that once these contracts are in place, task authorizations will be issued for various projects or work, and depending on how much that task authorization is, it could come back to the commission for approval or not. So very standard agreements, and I just want to remind the commission as well that local preference does not tie into the CCNA list, so you will see the 11 firms listed below. There are 2 Lakeland firms in there, and I believe those were the only 2 Lakeland companies as well out of the list of 20, so both of the Lakeland business companies.
All Lakeland companies
Yes.
that were in there. Okay. Questions on that one? Any problems on consent? We'll leave it there. Thank you very much. And that next is that we had discussion in our budget meeting, as you know, about what to do with some of the ARPA funds with respect to helping some of the businesses that we knew were having difficulties in place. And so we have a request to appear from general public from Amy Williams, who is present. Yes.
And what about the arts groups? How did they request? I think there was just some confusion.
There is. I mean, there isn't confusion there. There is another discussion that needs to take place with the Mayor's Council on the Arts, and Carrie is going to be on the September 6th meeting to approach that. That still is in front of our budget decision, so that we would have an opportunity to look at both of these together out of the ARPA money.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Well, and so Ms. Falwell and I emailed over the last few days to try to figure that out, and that has been confirmed for that date. And there's also, I think, a request where she would like to include some supplemental materials with the agenda packet that would come out in advance of that appearance under the request to appear.
There was one other thing I was thinking about with respect to that. I totally lost it. Sorry. Apologize. So are there any questions for Amy? And Amy's going to make a presentation, but any comments or questions with respect to...
Maybe after the presentation.
All right. None? All right. Thank you very much for being here. Equalization hearing, we have none. Public hearings, anyone?
All right, so several ordinances for second reading. Numbers 1, 3, and 4 are all related to the Swindell Road annexation and redesignation. Chuck, you want to go with that?
Sure. The subject property is a little over 8.5 acres immediately east of the Well-Dine facility on the north side of Swindell Road, out very close to County Line and I-4. This also has companion I-2 zoning and business park land use amendment as well as the zoning action. I think at your last commission meeting, Teresa showed pictures of the property. There we go. As it exists today. And so one of the questions or concerns that we had heard during the Planning and Zoning Board was how this site, which, with it having straight I-2 zoning, would not have any custom buffering or other conditions beyond what is already required in the Land Development Code, how would that affect some of the surrounding properties? And so I think the closest residential home to this site is about 400 feet. The Land Development Code, as this would have a more intensive use than the surrounding properties to the east and the north, would already require an 8-foot wide fence or wall, 12-foot wide landscape buffer, what we call a type C buffer. And so the Land Development Code is well positioned to handle this type of use adjacent to county property. And if anything comes up during the specific design, and I'm going to jump over here real quick to the, here a little later on, we'll talk about the site plan, which is actually just for illustration purposes only. Because of this being straight zoning, the intent is to fit somewhere around a 100,000 square foot business park building on the property, but this is not a binding site plan. This is basically what can fit when looking at setbacks and other land development code requirements. If anything comes up that's out of the ordinary during the design process, we have a good record of working with property owners in the county to address buffers or other issues because of the interaction between city and county property.
Any questions? Yes, Commissioner
I have
McCollum.
2 questions. What are the blue hashtags, blue liner? That's not water, right?
Those are floodplain areas, and so there would have to be some mitigation and some
So a hurricane, there
stormwater.
will be water, is what you're telling me. That's great.
Unless they go through, I mean, it won't have to be engineered, but they will have to address that issue during the
Okay, good.
site design.
My second question is, thank you for that, because people like to yell at us when there's a lot of water. So the entrance and exit onto Swindell Road, I had asked last time, Chuck, and you weren't here. So if that's going to push out is that going to push any kind of semi-trailers or anything back out onto Swindell? And if so, is there any way to widen that area? Because it looks like it's wide, I think, going to the north, right? It's already widened.
Exactly, and Swindell Road is owned and operated by Polk County, so they will
Right.
have to go through the Polk County permitting process. But we work with them closely in these types of situations to avoid kind of the hourglass effect where you
Yeah.
go from a wider road, which existed. That was all done when Well Done in Crystal Springs was developed to the west by Lefroy. So in this area, the intent would be is to look at the ultimate trip generation of the ultimate plan, see if a left turn lane is needed, and that's going to end up guiding other adjustments to Swindell Road that would be needed going back to the west. One of the things we definitely know is an issue out here is as you get further east on Swindell, the lanes get narrower and it does
Right.
become somewhat of a substandard county facility, and so that's something that we're going to be looking at very closely at the site plan review. The other thing that is occurring out here as well, and it's just across the county line in Hillsborough County, is that a pilot travel center is under development immediately west of Weldine.
Right.
So there's a lot of coordination that's also occurring between Lakeland, Polk County, Plant City, and Hillsborough to address those traffic impacts just west of here.
And so if that is a county road, then does DOT get involved with how to pay for all of that? How
Not
does that
really.
work?
This is all strictly primarily the responsibility of the county, but then depending on the ultimate development plan approval, we may get asked, occasionally get requests for sidewalk maintenance or other things that
Right.
happen long-term after the construction is done. The good news too is that because you're jumping into the county immediately east of here,
Yeah.
we don't end up running into the situation at this point of being asked to take on the ownership or responsibility for Swindell Road.
Well, and one of my concerns is the infrastructure when it leans to counties managing that part. They just have such a big geographical area through all of unincorporated Polk. I don't want it to get to a point where we have a Lake Miriam issue or something like that where we're responsible for a piece and they're responsible for the other piece. The infrastructure's just not there, especially as you get trucks in and out of here.
And that was actually something that we ended up working on primarily on the annexation side, is that there would have been a gap on Swindell Road that would not have been in the city. And so we worked with our GIS team to square that off and make sure that at least, whereas Lake Miriam, you run into county on the south side of the right-of-way. This one, we wanted to make sure that both sides of the road and the right-of-way itself were within the city so that
Right.
we would eliminate that
Exactly.
issue.
Thank you.
Good questions. Others? Yes,
Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner
Good
McCollum.
questions. Along those lines, Chuck, you talked about sidewalk maintenance, potential requests. Are there other costs with an annexation that the city would have to incur?
On something at this level, and I'll look to Heath, I mean, I don't think there's really, in this instance, much that the city would take on beyond the sidewalk maintenance, with the sidewalk being in the city limits. You're looking at street lighting or anything like that, and utilities is all handled through, would be handled through water utilities department through their normal processes. And so in something like this, there isn't anything that's extraordinary that we'd be taking on that we wouldn't otherwise be dealing with.
Chuck did a good job.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, number 2.
All right, number 2 is the request for conditional use for the parking lot at where the old Florida Citrus Mutual building, taking one direction that way, is we have received a request from the applicant for that to continue that ordinance to September 6th. They are still analyzing some of the conditions associated with this.
Okay. So that's a
And
pass.
you'll need to take that formal action, though, and vote to continue it on
Okay,
Monday.
we need to vote for
So
the,
we'll make a motion
Just a
to
motion to
continue it.
continue.
Okay.
And just make it to the date certain so that we don't have to re-advertise it.
and that date is going to be September 6th.
Tuesday, September 6th.
Right?
3 and 4 were related to what Chuck was just talking about on Swindell Road. Number 5 is a request for a major modification PUD zoning for Tract E of Morgan Creek Reserve, south of Medell Road. I think you've previously considered that for a larger, more dense development. Chuck? Go.
Yes, and so based on the testimony that was received at the Planning and Zoning Board meeting or public hearing, the application for 49 lots on these 39 acres south of similarly zoned property in the county to the north was reduced down to 5 lots. And so this represents an overall substantial reductions in terms of units and density relative to what the commission reviewed and actually denied back in 2021, which was 56 units, and certainly it's a substantial change in the current application process from the 49 lots that was requested earlier this year. So right now we're looking at five lots on 35 acres. They would be building an internal street to city standards when the roadway does enter into the city of Lakeland, and there would be a stub out at Morgan Creek to accommodate a future connection to the south, to tracks B and C and ultimately Pipkin Road. But frankly, because of some of the expected challenges of crossing Morgan Creek, that's something that, at least in my mind, I like to think of as like a 20 or 30 year type project in the event we need to do something to relieve Medell to the county line. But as part of planning, we just want to make sure we're not precluding the ability to make that crossing in the future. There is through the county, an ARPA project to improve the drainage at Medola and Hamilton, and that's under design right now. So there is something that's moving forward on that front to be able to address. I know one of the major issues related to from the residents out there related to drainage.
Wonderful.
Is there a timeline on that?
I'll get more specifics in terms of, I think it was in fiscal year 23 was when they were looking to go to construction.
Okay.
But it is something that they know is a high priority and are trying to get that fast tracked.
Chuck, this obviously, when you're talking about a reduction of this size, this seems like a no-brainer. Is there a reason that that this is going to cause a headache that we're not aware of or thinking about?
I think frankly, a lot of the comments that we have received to this point are related to the 29 lots in the county adjacent to the north.
Right.
In terms of 5 units, a minimum lot size of 210,000 square feet in the city of Lakeland is something that's very low density in terms of what we deal with. And in terms of traffic impacts, you're talking just what we control here is 5 PM peak hour trips.
It just seems like a no-brainer, so I'm wondering what I'm missing.
I think a lot of it is just the concerns about the compatibility with the 29 lots outside of the city between here and Medella Road.
Yeah.
I think we've taken great care to address the buffering issues, to address the interaction between this site and the adjacent properties in the county. Drainage, I know continues to be a major issue, and so a lot of the conditions related to kind of going extraordinary lengths to mitigate this project's impacts on the adjacent drainage and stormwater system, those conditions are still carried forward like they were when we were looking at 56 lots. I think some of the other issues is just related to septic versus city sewer. But again, 5 lots, 210,000 square foot, it makes sense that this could be on septic. It's got to go through the normal permitting process, by other entities like the health department, but this isn't unreasonable and really isn't much different than what's out there today.
Commissioner McCarthy.
So if we zone it this way, and then who's to say that coming down the road that this property isn't resold to a different developer and then they want to rezone it and break it apart?
It can definitely be sold off to a different developer or different owner, but it would still, any changes would have to come back through the Planning and Zoning Board PUD modification process. And so given the history of this site, I think the threshold, which would require a major modification, which would require P&Z action and then action by the City Commission, there are steps and safeguards in place to protect this plan and at least limit the modifications without coming back through the public process.
Thank you.
Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Chuck, the drainage improvement you mentioned at Medella and Hamilton, was that a new development since the previous application that was denied?
It is. Even going back to 2021, we had a number of conversations with the county engineer's office and in Public Works, Ryan Lazenby had developed some concepts of how this area was actually draining. And so in the conversations with the county, I think they really started to realize that, one, with everything that's happening in Hillsborough County, there's an impact over here on our side of the road, and then everything that was happening along the Hamilton corridor, a lot of that's being transitioned to business park land uses outside of the city, of course. But as you come down to this location, it was just a domino effect that something needed to happen. Then the county's taken action to address those concerns, and so that is a new development since this was denied last year.
Okay. Yes, thank you, because I remember we did talk at length about flooding concerns and drainage, so I just wanted to clarify that improvement, the new project, it was not something we were discussing the last time, so thank you.
Yeah, and I would think those 5 lots would be very attractive to lots of people who would like to still have some,
Maintain that.
have that distance. So selling 5 of them probably is not going to be difficult to do. Number 6.
6 is a major modification in PD zoning for the Ledger site for a multi-use development. Chuck's going to go over that.
And so I know there was a lot of conversation at the last meeting about this site, which is the Ledger property at the southeast corner of Lime Street and Sykes Boulevard. Essentially, what this zoning action does is that it develops a planned unit development that allows for C6 uses that you would typically find in the downtown area, and special conditions related to connectivity and a lot of things that we would be looking at specifically unique to this site. But really, the headline here is that with C6 uses, what we would expect in terms of residential retail, building bulk height, is what would be allowed throughout the remainder of downtown within the C6 area. We continue to have conversations with the development team as they start to provide more detail of the plan, and they will be available, and on Monday we'll be making a presentation to at least give an idea of perhaps how one development option could look on site, kind of typical urban style mixed use. The other issue, too, is that this would allow the Ledger's operations to continue to be a permitted use on the site. It's very unusual here to have an industrial operation like the Ledger in the downtown area, and so this kind of trues that up as well and it folds that into the ultimate development program.
Excellent. Any questions on that? Commissioner McCarthy.
I just have a historic question. I think this is important for the public, and I don't want to talk about it really on Monday, but when you look at a site like this is exciting to me that we're going to repurpose and we're able to tweak. But, coming down or coming north on New York Avenue, I know we have LE right there, that power, but what's the history on how did that used to go all the way through?
Yes.
And then what year did we do that? And I think that's a really critical component for the public to understand planning, and when we do use changes and things like that this is what can happen, because if we look at our road structure, if we maybe had kept New York open all the way through, then it would have alleviated some of the arterial problems that we have on South Florida. But this is why these discussions are really important, and sometimes I think people think we just skim over them, but, I just wanted to know the history of us closing that road.
And that's a huge point, and when you hear the planners talk about connectivity and maintaining the urban grid, I think this is kind of the poster child for why we really get defensive about that, is because New York Avenue
Nice
did
pivot.
did used to, this will work, well, New York Avenue used to run all the way through.
Right.
Down to Lenox where it stops today. And up until about the mid-'90s, it was part of a one-way pair system where New York Avenue was 2 lanes southbound and Missouri was 2 lanes northbound. So.
We've talked about that.
That'd be nice.
And so when the Ledger's main office building and site was up in the far northeast corner, northeast corner of the property, until it was about 1997, 98, Ledger, of course, was looking down at the Parkway, Hardin Boulevard. That site didn't work out. Well, they were close, but it didn't work out, so they refocused here. Came up with a plan that allowed them to continue to operate in their old building at the Lime, Missouri intersection while they were building their new facility to the south. Of course, part of that, they had to sever the street grid, take New York Avenue out. Then the substation went in. I can't remember the timing of that relative to Ledger construction, but it was close. It was all within about a year or so. So the Lakeland Electric substation sits right here at the north end of New York at Palmetto. And so in terms of being able to reestablish a street connection as had it existed before 1998, can't do that now. And so what we're trying to do through this PUD is at least establish a trail, bike connection to connect this site with the lake-to-lake system. And definitely we want to make sure that we're clear that this is not a car connection. The PUD today doesn't allow a car connection. This will not change that part of the condition. But we would want to have a bike trail to connect with the rest of the network here. We would also want to make sure that we have the ability to connect Olive Street, which that connection is sort of there today.
Thanks, Chuck.
And perhaps Hickory. But Hickory, you do run into some great issues relative to the loading dock on the south side of the Ledger building. That's probably longer term, but we want to at least make sure that we're able to do that in the future. So part of this plan is kind of restitching back the grid as best as we can. But yeah, New York Avenue was that was a signalized intersection, so it was a good shortcut to get from Sykes to Dixieland without having to go onto Florida Avenue or down past Lake Hunt.
And these pedestrian bike grids are going to be very, very important.
Oh, yeah, this whole project's really exciting. I just, the business model hasn't changed entirely for the newspaper business, so they don't probably need that big of a building, which is why we're even talking about this. But I think in long-term planning world, it's really important to look back as it is to look forward to see where we, how we did that and how that kind of evolved. And now we're going to try and retro it back and at least have some connectivity for pedestrians and bikes. But man, it would be nice to have the car there.
The grid is important.
Yes, it is. Thanks, Chuck.
In some ways, it will probably help us accentuate the center of that as a hub in that property, which not having traffic in it will be
good.
Will be very good.
Easier to do,
Yeah.
Okay, next.
All right, 7 and 8 are related. 7 is the comp plan amendment, 8 is the rezoning for some property off of Olive Street for a affordable housing project.
And this one, you heard about this one last time as well. Really, the land use change is applicable to about 0.9 acres going from the business park to RM. With the balance, the entire site would also include a rezoning to PUD to account for the 96 multifamily units. There's been a lot of coordination with the developers, the utilities, because there's a number of rights-of-way, there are a number of utility easements that are in this area, and of course the surrounding property owners to, at least as this project evolves, make sure that, whatever we're vacating in terms of the rights-of-way is getting reestablished and for the internal circulation for the development. Any of the easements that end up getting vacated would have to be replaced, particularly when it comes to drainage coming across Olive Street to the south. And then, of course, having a buffer against the Wayman Ditch to the east has also been something that has been cited as an important issue from residents and certainly staff, to kind of protect the residents from people coming into that ditch and creating, dealing with that attractive nuisance. There's still a number of steps that have to happen for this plan to proceed in the implementation phase, and it's the right-of-way vacations and the utility easement vacations that certainly the commission will be seeing in the future. But this plan meets the Land Development Code, has support of some of the key stakeholders in the neighborhood, and does maintain connectivity to Wayman Street and the local street grid to the west back towards Southwest Sports Complex and the Westgate Central Trail. Part of this plan also along the west side is while they would not be constructing this, what we want to do is preserve a corridor to ultimately extend the Westgate Central Trail directly up to Olive Street and not have to circulate through the neighborhood as is the case now. So there's a lot of things we're trying to do to put those building blocks together.
I'm so sorry.
Commissioner McCarley.
Talking a lot about infrastructure. Hey, where is our transit stop? I know it's on Olive, but where is it? And we need a shelter there.
That is actually
Work that in.
one of our conditions, and I know this came up at the I think it was last month's Citrus Connection Board meeting, with the new routes that become effective in October.
Right.
The service comes off of Olive Street,
Yep.
and so hopefully we can get that reestablished after this project is up and developed. But the stop right now, I think it's a little bit further.
It's further west.
West of Oregon.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
But they are showing a transit shelter area up on the north side of the
Okay.
site, and that is a condition if they put one in.
Well, I remember Miss Pickett, I think it was before COVID maybe, or maybe just after. There isn't, I mean, the lot wasn't even moved, so to even catch the bus at that intersection, we had to go through transit and get it cleaned up because there's not really anything but a post there. So, but with this many people moving in, I think it would be nice just to have a good covered area so that they have access to the transit system.
And there's another.
And the density would help that.
Absolutely. And there's another 80 or 90 lots that are also, or units that are under development on Plateau in the county. And so we're starting to get more people in this area. And so transit along Olive Street will become a big issue.
Well, the recapture of this area for housing is exciting.
Yep.
It really is. Anything else? Okay, next.
All right, that's it for second readings. We have one ordinance for first reading that requires a public hearing because it's a large-scale comp plan amendment. And this is also related to a couple of ordinances that are on the agenda for first reading. All three are related to the Southwest Park off of West Pipkin. Chuck, you want to describe that?
Sure. This is, of course, this was the property that the city just recently purchased from English Trade for the major Southwest Park complex. The actions here would be to change the land use from business park to recreation. The zoning would go to limited development. There's no zoning on the property today. And then we would be assigning a conditional use to this property as well for the park itself. We're talking a little over, or almost 101.5 acres in an area that is extremely active right now in terms of residential development. So what this does is it gives us the ability to have, a better complementary use in having a park versus a business park use. But also goes to great strides of satisfying one of our big level of service needs for a park facility in this area. And so this is the result of probably 10 or 15 years of investigation between Parks and Recreation, Community Development, others to find a suitable site. What we'll do is show some pictures of the property. In fact, you can see the homes in Riverstone that are under construction as we speak in the distance. You can see the relationship to, you've got Town Park immediately to the east, Riverstone to the south, and then Hawthorne, which is under development now, immediately to the west. And so this is going to be completely surrounded by single-family residential. This is the master plan that's been developed by the Parks Department. We're looking at two dog parks. We're looking at a potential library site or a multi-use facility on this property. Trail system, ball fields, connectivity back to specifically Riverstone and Hawthorne, because of the way that those communities were platted or are being platted, we've got the opportunity to have direct connections in to the park from those neighborhoods. We also, through the zoning or through the conditional use, have opened up the door that if they're able to work something out with Town Park, to be able to get a connection in there from the east.
That is just going to be a beautiful amenity. Limited development, what can't you do, put up in that?
I think traditionally limited development has been more or less a placeholder, but it's really almost, it's not really like conservation type recreation, just passive with no real structures or infrastructure needs. It's basically just leaving the site kind of in its current state. But limited development is a very restrictive zoning category.
So those buildings would fit in that category?
It's where the conditional use kicks in. So the conditional use recognizes that it was based off of the limited development zoning category, but is specific to this park and to this plan. And so that's where we've got the conditions, we've got the master plan that will be adopted as part of that is through the conditional use permit.
So the conditional use of a master plan with buildings reflected on it, like for the library, as an example, then make it feasible, but doesn't set a pattern for any other area.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for that education. Appreciate it. Anything else? Yes, Commissioner
Sir,
McLeod.
what's the latest on our timeline for having this built and open?
I listened to Mr. Donahue presentation. I know right now that I don't think funding is specifically earmarked until around 2030. But I think everybody's recognizing that something's probably going to need to happen sooner than that. And so somewhere between now and 2030.
Okay.
But there's no timeline built up
Okay.
beyond that.
That's the most common question I get from residents in that area. Very excited about it, as they should be, but when is it going to open? So, yeah, as that changes, just, I know you will, but keep us updated and whatever we can do to work toward that 2030 or maybe advance that. And that'd be.
And the good news is that everything, all the residential development out there, they're, paying park impact fees. And so hopefully that type of cash will at least allow some phasing to occur. But Parks and Rec, they do an amazing job of getting these projects moved ahead and on the ground.
Chuck, can you tell me, when we look at the acreage and we compare that with something else we have in the city, can you give me another park comparable, or like what would Crago or some of these others be?
I think off the top of my head, it's probably something along the lines of probably a little bigger than like Lake Parker Park. I mean, it may be Lake Crago and Lake Parker together.
Okay.
It's a sizable area.
I think Crago's 117, isn't it?
I think it is.
Okay.
And this one's
101. 101. So that's a big area.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
And you got a lot of water in it, but that's okay because
That's a good thing.
it's a good feature.
But also just kind of for scale, Lake Crago, when you go out there now, there's a back section that has been developed for other multi-use fields that you don't see today. So it is much larger than what you see when you drive out there. There's a gate up at the moment.
Oh, yeah, I'm including that. It's bikeable. Okay.
And I'll grab the acreages of some of the other larger parks.
Just be curious from a visual standpoint.
Okay, Resolution C1.
All right, we have three resolutions on the agenda that are all part of the process. These are the final steps to put our special assessment liens on the tax roll in November for collection. The first resolution relates to the loss clearing, and demolition special assessments that you see. We have equalization hearings probably every other meeting on those. And so all the assessments that are on this non-ad valorem assessment roll attached to this resolution have gone through that equalization process. So the property owners have been given notice that we're going to impose a lien against their property. They've been given the opportunity to come before the city commission and object to the imposition of those liens. So all of these properties have already gone through that whole due process issue. So, I mean, as just a pure legal matter, this really isn't the place to challenge the underlying merits of the assessment at this point. Nonetheless, we will, as you know, probably get a few people that will show up for that.
Okay.
But if there are questions that staff can't answer related to any of these particular liens, we can always just pull those off the roll, and that would not prejudice our ability to put those liens on next year's non-ad valorem assessment roll for collection. So that's number one is the lots clearing and demolition non-ad valorem assessment roll. Number two is the Orangewood assessment roll. That assessment used to be much larger when we did some significant capital improvements in there for their stormwater and sewer system. Now we just go in there and do some mowing for them, and that's why there's still an assessment against them. It's $38 per parcel.
And the third?
And the third one is the Heather Point non-ad valorem assessment. That's been successfully concluded. And as you know, the City Commission agreed to spread out the repayment of that loan that the city gave over 10 years. So this is the second year of that 10-year assessment, $706 per year.
Okay, there's no community redevelopment agency action, so that takes us to City Manager 5A.
Thank you, Mayor. I have three items this morning for presentation. The first item that will be on it's on the commission agenda is regarding a change order with Hubbard Construction for Taxiway E rehabilitation and Taxiway S construction at Lakeland Linder International Airport. We've talked about these projects fairly extensively in the past, and they are now complete and results in a final change order in the amount of $66,590.72, which increases the contract with Hubbard Construction to $4,940,839.02. The changes are related to final quantity adjustments, sodding, LED air-filled signage, pavement, electrical, and piping related cost. Also, there was a reduction on the fees for the resident project representative that are required on these projects. Funding, the projects are funded through 100% FAA reimbursable grant. There are, however, some ineligible costs that are funded through an 80% FDOT grant, and the remaining about 20% would be funded by the airport. The recommendation is to approve the change order and to authorize utilization of the airport's available bond funds for the airport's portion of the ineligible cost with those grants, and there will be no additional appropriations.
All right, any questions? Next.
Next item is regarding a task authorization with Kimley Horn and Associates for the downtown parking management plan update. And just key in on the word update there. There is an existing plan, and this would be for an update. And it would the update to that plan would be for a not to exceed amount of $123,000. The existing plan was a result of some engagement with Kimley Horn to study the downtown parking in 2016. Since that time, there's been a lot of development and redevelopment and parking related projects that have occurred, and so it is in need of an update. Kimley Horn will provide planning services based on their project understanding of the city's goals that are associated with the development of a parking management plan. And these things will include a supply, demand, and a parking adequacy study, a plan to address current and future parking demands in the area, some community engagement to establish parking needs and priorities in the downtown, and policy recommendations to guide parking decisions, funding, and management. As I stated, a not to exceed fee of $123,000 has been negotiated under the city's continuing professional services agreement with Kimley Horn, and so the recommendation from staff will be to execute the task authorization with Kimley Horn.
Will this study include a recommendation electronically about what's open as part of it, as part of the scope, not a code in development and engineering for, but just perhaps what we could consider and where those things might be located?
Are we talking about some of the LED signage at the garages that show?
I meant to say dynamic
parking and potentially some of the applications. That's being worked on as part of a separate project that's already underway, but certainly there will be elements of that would be tied into the study as well. Yeah, so we're further along in that regard than needing the study to then make some of those movements. Some of that's already in process.
great.
Yeah, that is excellent.
Because I think that will be so helpful.
We are
And-
excited for that
Well,
day
and
to come.
it just reduces parking overall, and, I mean, traffic as people are searching for things because they know where to go.
And that one of the things that, I think are fairly obvious, but we've seen it, people go by one of the garages, they're not, they see that there's vehicles parked on the first floor. They're not sure if anything's available above that, and so they don't want to drive in there to make the loop and come back out. And so that will certainly assist with the utilization of our existing and also future supply.
Any other questions on this? Okay, next.
Okay, the next one is, I know, one that will be well received, and I'm going to need just a few moments. This one's a little lengthy. This is regarding a recommendation for the Community Development Block Grant Mitigation Program Subrecipient Agreement between the State of Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, or DEO, and the City of Lakeland for the Lake Bonnet Drainage Basin Flood Hazard and Debris Mitigation Project. The City of Lakeland has been awarded $42,986,390 in Community Development Block Grant Mitigation funding for the Lake Bonnet Drainage Basin Hazard and Debris Mitigation Project from the DEO. The fully reimbursable grant is in support of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's program to fund eligible projects that demonstrate an increase of community resiliency through infrastructure projects such as rehabilitation of stormwater management systems, improvement to drainage facilities, and restoration of critical infrastructure. The project funded through this grant will consist of wetland restoration, development of flood mitigation facilities, and infrastructure retrofit to reduce flood risk in the surrounding area. The project will consist of 3 phases. Phase 1 will be a feasibility study, Phase 2 design and engineering, and then Phase 3 finally with construction. On Monday, I can provide a little more detail on the first phase of the feasibility study. The parties anticipate that the total cost of the project will be $42,986,390. DEO agrees to reimburse the city for 100% of the allowable cost upon completion of the scheduled project deliverable milestones at no less than 5% of the total deliverable cost. The initial funding for deliverables number 1 and 2 will be provided by an internal loan to be dispersed as needed. First year project's costs are estimated to be $2,226,371, with the remainder of the project implementation to be completed over the next 5 years. Annual interest of approximately $157,000 will be paid from the unappropriated surplus of the Stormwater Utility Fund, and the principal of which will be repaid with the grant funds as they are reimbursed upon completion of each of the deliverables. There is a estimated project budget that's included with the agenda item, and so the recommendation from staff is to execute the funding agreement with the DEO.
Right, Commissioner Ricarle.
So this is 16 months, God bless Lori Smith. And yes, thank you so much. So 16 months since the governor said we are getting this, so we move at a glacial pace in government funding, but this is really, really exciting. And prior to that, we're almost at the 2-year mark of starting to even talk about this with AECOM and Bonnet Springs. So thank you. I just want to commend our staff on this. This was Herculean effort, literally, and so thank y'all so much for doing it, because it really will benefit overall. One of the exciting pieces of this is it kind of goes into the waters that end up in the Hillsborough River that ultimately end up in the Gulf. So this is one of those really big issues that seems like a Lakeland project, but it's so far beyond us, and you guys just great job. And I know Emily was on board in the beginning too with AECOM and really trying to facilitate how the city could be in partnership. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't wait for that check to come in and get it cleaned up. So thanks.
I have a question, only because I don't understand. When it says that
So look at deliverable number 2, which is the phase 1 feasibility, the 1.3 plus 1/5 of deliverable 1/6 of deliverable number 1 project implementation. You're asking about the cost?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you. It's psychic.
She's a mind reader.
Yeah, I know. Thank you.
I had the same question, that's why I already knew it.
All right. Anything else? All right. And that is your last item, sir?
Yes.
Any other purpose at all? All right, City Attorney A1.
All right, the two ordinances you see for first reading are related to the Southwest Park. So that's the rezoning to LD and then the conditional use that you've heard that's necessary in order for potential buildings out there. B1 is a resolution amending the resolution that accepted various positions in the city from the civil service system. This resolution accepts the new CRA senior project manager position and the deputy city attorney position. So Monica Hollis before the civil service board. She actually caught the fact that her position was not in there and added that to the resolutions. Number two is renaming a portion of North Sloan Avenue to the name Bonnet Springs Boulevard. Chuck, do you have a map showing where that is?
Sure. This is a short section of what is now Sloan Avenue between Lake Beulah on the south side of the CSX rail line and George Jenkins Boulevard to the actual park entrance. At the request of Bonnet Springs Park, they had asked that we change this section of street to Bonnet Springs Boulevard to really help highlight that this is the entrance into their premier facility. And so our Property Information Office has sent out requests for basically support or votes from the affected property owners. Everybody is in agreement that this is
Desirable.
This is desirable, and there was no objections. That included CSX, DOT, and so basically we're just asking that this be approved.
Any questions? Yes, Commissioner McCarthy.
Neighbors are good with it?
So far, I haven't heard any objections from any of the neighbors. Sloan Avenue will continue to exist north of
Of that
Okay.
turn.
So Crescent Heights, okay, I just want to make sure they're okay.
Very nice question. Good.
Mayor, when I was out of town, I saw two specific tunnels that went under train tracks. It was interesting. Yeah. So,
You were out of town.
well, I wasn't
not in
out of
America.
town. Yeah, I wasn't in America. But it was interesting because it jumped.
designed to be a cynical comment.
But it was interesting.
Sorry, I do have a George Jenkins Boulevard question to the west. I hate to bring this up, but since it's a small group. That road seems very similar to South Florida and what we were doing to mitigate accidents and things, and I drive on it a lot lately. Is there a game plan for that?
At one point in time, DOT had evaluated as part of the overall larger US 92 improvements over to County Line Road.
Okay.
That ended up being kind of taken out with the last PD&E or the Project Development Environmental Study update. So really, there's nothing on the books right now to deal with this section of roadway. One of the big issues that we presented to DOT, and then DOT conducted some development concepts for us, is a roundabout
Yeah.
To slow it down.
at the intersection to slow things down, because as you come over the overpass and you hit that traffic light, then the road narrows significantly as you head west. And so that's really the big issue, is trying to at least manage both ends of the corridor. But really, at this point, there's nothing.
So narrowness, not speed, or narrowness and speed?
Both. And I think too, as we see the influx, when that park opens in October, the people coming over from the west and then also coming off George Jenkins from the east, it just makes me a little squirmy with safety. And after that's open and that's all cleaned up, because DOT has done, and the city have worked so hard on that Sloan Avenue piece, I'd hate to see us start to dig up west. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a perfect, sort of like the whole Pipkin thing, let's get that situated, and then we already have such a, that's what, 18-month project, which is not us, for the record.
And one of the issues we have here, and this goes back to with some of the early permitting meetings with DOT, is that there's such a right-of-way constraint as you move from the signal back to the west. They're really, without having a capital project, the ability to go in there and acquire the right-of-way. And so I think if we were able to focus on a roundabout there, that would help a lot, because that left turn lane only holds the car as you're coming in from the west. And then if we can continue also to work with DOT to get a connection to Memorial Boulevard from the north, consistent with the AAA study, the Lake Canary Alternatives Analysis, then we can start to provide some alternative entrances. But this area has been and will be a challenge until we figure out how we move forward with a roundabout that's similar to what Public Works is managing on the south side of the rail
Right.
line.
Agreed. And I think in the interim, we have to be very vigilant about the speed going west, because it is what it is in narrowness, but what happens is we have people that bolt through there.
That's right.
And having come across the bridge, and it's not safe anymore, and it went narrow fast, and they don't recognize it. And so both on a policing side as well as making certain that we evaluate the speeds that are posted, because I don't even remember what they are.
I think they're 45.
45.
Yeah, I think.
And it's so mixed use. I mean, there's semis, there's, there's all kinds of variable.
Buses.
Yeah, buses, yeah.
And one of the things we can look at is, is there something that can be done with the signal to at least provide a little bit of additional time so that people can look east and west to make sure the traffic is stopping before they progress across Georgia. Because there's some things that we can look at to see if that's a possibility.
Okay, good discussion. Anything else? Next.
All right, the next three items actually are grant agreements or amendments to grant agreements relating to different projects at the airport.
Yeah, the first one is the funding from FDOT in the amount of $2.5 million. This is for an upgrade to the Cat 3 instrument landing system out at the airport. And the resolution just corresponds to the grant agreement for your approval to make sure that money is budgeted and the airport's funding. The second item is also a supplemental grant agreement in the amount of $1,274,261. That's for the relocation of taxiway P at the airport. And then the third agreement is related to the taxiway P project, but that is funding that we're going to receive from the FAA, and that is in the amount of $4,459,289. So.
Any questions on those? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Miscellaneous reports we've already done, so that takes us to 2.
Yes, number 2 is an engineering services agreement with Hazen and Sawyer for downtown wastewater master plan. As you know, downtown's growing quite a bit with some high-rise, high-density type development that will certainly put stress on the wastewater infrastructure downtown. So this is to bring on Hazen and Sawyer to analyze what we've got there and to work with community development in 5-year chunks to see what we anticipate will be coming forward as development downtown, and then to prioritize different wastewater projects in order to try to anticipate and mitigate the impacts of the growth as it occurs downtown. The total cost for this task authorization is $117,050 and has been budgeted in Water Utilities FY22 budget. I know Robbie Kniss is here if you have any technical questions.
Yes.
I don't think it's actually a technical question, but as I read this, so is this is more of an engineering side of not what we have, because we know what we have, right? So we're not evaluating what we have. We're looking at growth and saying, what is it we need to be able to handle what's coming up in the future? Is that correct?
Yeah, so we have a hydraulic model that tells us what the system is capable of. And then the master plan part is the crystal ball is, where are things going to build? This is a very mature system, and I say that meaning that it wasn't planned for the type of development we think is going to happen here. So we want to determine if we can serve those things, and if not, bring something into the area to be able to serve them and try and be proactive about it.
Are there instances like this where what we have, let's say that it's adequate for what we have, but we know our future growth is going to need more? Can we do supplemental lines, or is it all pull out and put in new? Can you run two systems simultaneously?
You can, and actually that's something that we're kind of thinking about here. Construction downtown is very challenging. You don't have much right of way. Pretty much it's building sidewalks and everything else is in the road. Everybody's already in the road, so you're fighting for real estate. Along Sykes Boulevard, you've got some steep slopes. We know there's going to be some things at Lake Wire, over at the Civic Center, so you've got some construction challenges with all that terrain. So one of the things that we've just kind of spitballed is there's a chance we're going to put some kind of master pump station somewhere and get everything out of here, and everybody will have to go to that master pump station. So I don't know if that'll be the end result, but that's at least the first thought.
But room being available, we can run multiple
Yeah, we don't want to, because now you're out there maintaining two different lines, and if DOT comes along and says, move your utilities, now we're doing it for multiple lines.
Yeah.
But, sometimes it doesn't make sense to tear out what's there and, just upsize it, because you have to keep them in service while you're building it as well.
That,
so.
yeah, and that was really kind of my question, is being able to have a simultaneous line, you at least are
Yep.
maintaining
You
service,
have
so.
to just hold it.
Bunch of porta-johns, I guess. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Robbie, Bill Anderson, I think, told me this is a 6-month study, more or less?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we carved this out to make it smaller, and when you look at I think on page 3, it shows a map. The only reason that looks so big is when you get up on those northern reaches, that's all flowing into the same area. All of this flow heads to the south and east, really over towards New Jersey, and goes into what we call our eastern trunk. So this was really focused on kind of downtown, the South Florida corridor, and really up to about Memorial Boulevard. The only reason the boundary goes further is because those gravity lines further up flow down. So this is a 6-month study so that we can get results, figure out, what people are building in the near term, and try and get something going construction-wise in the ground to be able to support.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you for the question. Next.
All right, Jared is going to address the next one.
Thanks, Palmer. This is a funding agreement with Swan Landing is the proposed project. It's an 88-unit affordable housing community located on Griffin Road at the intersection of Highland Fairways Boulevard. And going back to September 2020, the city put out an RFA in order to provide a local contribution that would help the developer in obtaining that award from the state, the housing credit financing. And we received several applications, and ultimately the Affordable Housing Review Committee recommended the award to Blue Griffin Terrace for this particular project. And the city did commit to that funding in October 2020. I guess, as I understand, there were some delays in underwriting some of the other financing instruments, and that's why it's taken us a little bit longer to get to where we are today. Under this agreement, we will provide a total of $460,000, 210 of that being passed through from the HUD Home Investment Partnership Program funding. So this funding does secure a minimum of 3 affordable units in the project. It's my understanding the entire project will be affordable, but our particular funding secures 3 units, one of which would be 50% AMI or less. And this is secured through a promissory note and a mortgage, as well as a land use restrictive covenant that's recorded against the property. Because it was originally committed in 2020 but not carried over, we are also asking for an appropriation of the $250,000 from the general fund, in addition to the authorization to execute the documents. And we have Mike Smith here from Housing to answer any further questions.
And that's money we have already reserved, correct?
Yes.
Right. For that purpose. Any questions? Any ads on your part?
No, that's it. I mean, the underwriting process for the state takes typically 12 to 18 months, so when we award it, it's not unusual for it to take up to 12 to 18 months before we would actually fund sign the funding agreement, and we plan on doing this same type of funding going forward. We're lining up our next RFP for the next round that the state will be putting out at the end of the year, so we'll be putting another RFP out in the next couple of months, hopefully attracting another multifamily developer.
Yes, Commissioner
So
McFarland.
isn't that, with the state funding, isn't that kind of difficult? So they apply and we get the grant, we know the amount at the time, but then obviously with inflation and cost of materials and all that kind of stuff, that might even delay the project further?
Yeah, so this project in particular got awarded and right in the middle of everything happening, material prices increased, so they've actually received some additional funding through other sources to cover those increase in costs. But I think they did see a few $1 million increase in the cost and have had to find some ways to get that additional funding. So that has happened, and I think new projects starting, the costs they'll know going forward, but this particular project, the timing of it, they were hit really hard with those increasing costs.
But they were able to get other funding, and it doesn't delay it further, and it doesn't, and then the state, do they have opportunities through the state to get different funding, or are these separate entities?
The state has actually come out with new funding
Okay.
just to address that.
So it responds to it.
And
It
that's,
doesn't leave them hanging.
they're scheduled to close on their funding the end of this month.
Okay.
And so we're tying our funding agreement to line up with them closing on their additional funding. But I think they ended up getting 2 or 3 additional funding resources to cover the gap in their increase in cost. And it's about a $23 to $24 million project that we're contributing $450,000 to. And it
makes
will
them-
be 100% affordable.
Makes them eligible to proceed, so.
Right, yeah, they wouldn't win the award without that local government as a
Absolutely.
requirement of their application.
So this is a perfect example of the kind of multiplication. There's another one soon to be announced that's coming.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful use of expanding affordable housing.
Well, I'm glad it's happening, because with all those materials, they could have walked away.
Right. And hopefully by the time we're building that those material costs have
Right.
leveled a little bit. Let's see, next is,
Okay, next is, you'll notice that we have an attorney-client closed-door session scheduled for
Yes.
8:30 on Monday morning. That is to discuss the Yellow Gifford versus City of Lakeland litigation. We just had some mediation in that, and fortunately, there's an exemption from the Sunshine Law that allows us to talk to you so that we can talk about the merits of the case and strengths and weaknesses without compromising your position with the other litigants in the matter. So we're going to talk to you about that on Monday during the closed-door session, and then depending on how that goes,
which is in this room.
we've got this. The way that works is we have to open the session at a public meeting, so we'll start over there. I have to make an announcement that I need to talk to you guys, and then we'll come over here. The only people allowed in the meeting are the city commission, your attorneys, the chief executive officer, and a court reporter. The clerk's not even allowed to be in here. But the court reporter does record the whole thing. The only thing you can talk about are litigation strategy, expenditures, that type of thing. You can't talk about anything else. It's all transcribed. And then that the transcript is a public record upon the conclusion of the litigation. So, I mean, the idea is, again, you don't want to compromise your position in the litigation by having a public discussion about this stuff. But once it's over, then the public gets to see what was discussed in that closed-door session.
So we'll start at 8:30 informally and come in here.
Come over here, and then we have to go back over there and actually make an announcement that we're done with the closed-door session. But we have it teed up on the agenda to take final action depending on how the discussion goes at 8:30.
Okay. Number 5.
And number 5 is a one-year use agreement with Central Florida Basketball Partners LLC, also known as the Lakeland Magic. As you know, we've been having a lot of discussions with them over the last several months about extending their tenure at the center there. And a lot of that discussion has centered around the naming rights to the center. And that's still under negotiation. So what this is simply a one-year kind of stopgap contract to give them some certainty so that they know that they can operate in the facility over the next year. And the negotiations about naming rights continue. So under this one-year agreement, it's mostly the same terms and conditions of the previous agreement, but there are some changes. One, it's a one-year deal that will expire June 30th, 2023. Right now, during the last year, the Magic paid a per-game fee of $8,442 to the city. That will increase to $9,000 per game for the upcoming season. The Magic will be a non-exclusive sales agent for center assets, so they can bring forward deals to put signage on the walls, name different buildings and rooms in the building, that type of thing. That would all be subject to a 50-50 split between the city and the Magic. Right under the previous contract, it was actually a 70-30 split, 70 going to the Magic and 30 to the city. So that's a more favorable deal to the city. We specifically carved out of this one-year agreement the right to negotiate with third parties and the right to negotiate with the Magic as well, the naming rights to the facility. And we have specified that if any deal does not provide the city with at least $250,000 per year or the greater of 50% of the naming rights revenue from a deal, that we would retain the discretion to turn that down. Doesn't mean we would turn that down, but we have kept our options open to negotiate with various different parties if necessary. The parking deal is slightly different. Under the previous deal, we were paying the magic $2 per parking ticket for all games with attendance of 2,500 or greater. And now under this one-year deal, we're going to pay the magic $3 per parking ticket regardless of the attendance at the games. And that is just to bring that into consistency with the way we've handled other sports teams that are playing at the facility. So with that, I know Tony is here, and Sean's been involved in a lot of negotiations with us as well. So if you have any questions, we'll answer them.
Utilization of this contract wouldn't preempt a lot of what you're planning on doing otherwise?
No, timing works out with our schedule changes.
Great. Parking?
I think it's fine. They asked for more,
Right.
and we settled on less of a shared revenue opportunity. So I think it's good. It's in line with what we're doing in Tropics, and it's a good opportunity. I think the biggest thing here is we have the non-exclusive sales of sponsorships, and we're going to open that up. Tropics have expressed some interest in selling some sponsors, so we'll be sharing in that revenue. Our own team will be a little more active in that regard as well. So it really it's a big change. And we're still holding fast in our naming.
Good. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Okay, it brings us to utility 2, C2.
Yes, the first item we have is a task authorization with EC Fennel. This is for the engineering design work associated with the 69 kV transmission line that will connect the Drainfield substation to the Hamilton substation, which is under construction. The 69 kV transmission line is approximately 5.6 miles long. Some of the scope of work will include, along with the engineering design, foundation design, the line design, environmental support, also estimates related to tree trimming and clearances, and verifying those clearances. This will be done, all the work will be done in accordance with the city's existing continuing contract with ECF. The total not to exceed cost of services is estimated to be about $156,205, and that is included in Lakeland Electric's FY 2022 budget.
Where's the Hamilton substation located? Proposed.
It's currently not built. We're actually evaluating the bids that went out to build it. It's going to be EPC built, so those bids should be, the final decision should be made Monday or Tuesday of next week. And then construction is expected to be done and completed within 18 months, or fall of 23. So we need the transmission line to fall in line with that, of course.
It's much better if you got something.
But to answer your question, it is actually east of the airport on Hamilton Road between Drainfield and Medella.
Okay.
And it's on the east side of, west side. I said east, west side of the airport. And the substation property is on the west side of Hamilton Road.
Is this near where the power grids are, in the solar?
It's in line. If you were to stand in the substation property and look back towards the airport, the solar panels are between the substation and the airport. Yes, sir.
That's a good location.
It's been needed for a long time. Well, they have heavy growth down there. The subs that we currently have serving that area is Drainfield substation, which is up by Geico and the airport. And then the other one is Winston, which is over here closer to Publix. So there's really nothing in that area, so it's needed.
Very important.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay, great.
So from a practicality standpoint, because I don't understand the electrical grid system that well, so what is the downside of not having it, and what do we gain by having that substation? How does that help better provide service to our residents?
Okay, so the downside is we're not going to have the capacity to serve any new development if we don't build it, because our lines coming from the other two substations are already pretty well getting loaded to the maximum.
Okay, back up and talk about what a substation does.
Okay. So our 69 kV line, transmission line that we're proposing to have this engineering contract for, once that line's built, it'll transmit the 69,000 volts to the substation site. We have power transformers there that'll convert that voltage from 69,000 to 12,470, which is our distribution voltage. Then we build breakers and bays that go out with individual circuits that carry that 12,470 phase-to-phase voltage out, and that branches down to 7,200 volt single-phase lines and transformers that feed homes. So it's all like if you think, the best way to think of it is like a water
That's a great description. I love that. Yeah,
Well, the best way to
I
think of it-
understood the idea, but that's a great.
The
Yeah.
best way to think of it is like a water system. So when you start at the head, you got a big pipe and you keep branching it down and you branch off with smaller ones. That's how we do.
Yeah.
And every now and then you have to have that new hub so you can start branching again, and that's what a substation is.
So the substations that we have now with the developments that we have, we're pooling all the available power pretty much. So we need a new substation to be able to provide more power for more developments.
Yeah, so we're with, a couple of them were mentioned in here earlier, Hawthorne and Riverstone are huge. I mean, those are large. There's a lot of industrial. I mean, when you see a Publix going in that area, county line, I never thought I would see. That tells you how much that area's grown. So with all of that, we're getting to the capacity of what we can serve. We're not there. I mean, we always overbuild for that reason. But our switching capability, if there's an emergency, we don't have the capability to really, do a lot of alternate switching to pick those customers up.
Very cool. Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? All right. Number 3.
So the last item we have is an agreement with Siemens Energy, Inc. This is for a long-term employee training program for McIntosh Unit 5. Since we've had the closure of Unit 3, we've had a lot of employee, obviously, turnover and as well as impending retirements. So we're losing that skilled workforce. So the intent behind this training program offered by Siemens is to get these employees to help ensure that they are skilled to develop and grow in terms of being able to operate Unit 5. Siemens is the original equipment manufacturer of Unit 5. So this is a sole source type contract. What they are offering are 4 one-week training sessions per year, and this would be a 3-year contract, and each training year would be $60,000. So the total amount of the cost of the contract is $180,000, and this the first year would be included in Lakeland Electric's FY22 budget, and then the subsequent 2 years would be subject to commission approval of the budget as well.
And why can't we do this with our own people?
Steve can answer it better, but it's very complex. It changes from time to time. They make upgrades to it. And it's very important that our folks understand all those upgrades, and we virtually have to have it to keep up with that. Steve, you can elaborate.
We do a lot of our own training, but it's more having the simulations, being able to do it when we're running, right? So you don't want to play with things when you're running. You want to take them off to the side and run them on simulated machines and so forth, which Siemens has. And so Siemens has the technology to do it and to have them be able to operate systems when they're not, affecting the operating unit.
Is this limited to any number of employees, or it doesn't have a people count in it in terms of the training?
I don't think it is, Steve.
There's only, we only have so many people.
But it doesn't practically matter.
To train, but, we're going to limit the amount, but it's probably about 10 or 12 at a time.
And the duration of those employees in terms of longevity?
Obviously, you're going after the ones that are the younger generation. We've got about 20 folks in the drop that are getting ready to drop the next 3 years. So, those are not the ones we're targeting. It's the ones that are not in the drop are the ones that are going to be targeted for the training. Effectively, you don't, right or wrong, a lot of the ones that are in the drop are control room center operators. And so they're already trained. So they don't need this. It's the ones that are still, block operators that are out in the field working.
Excellent. Yes, Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Steve. So if I understand you correctly, we have the expertise, talent, knowledge currently.
That's correct.
and there's enough time to bring in the training. So we're not operating at a deficit and trying to scramble and bring in training. And we have the expertise we need to keep Unit 5 running.
Currently, yes.
Yes.
Yes, I
Okay.
mean, but keep in mind, like, I have 2 shift supervisors that are in the drop, they leave next December. So, we're losing shift
So
supervisors.
it's time sensitive to
Oh,
get
yeah,
this going.
I got, several, our two best control operators are getting ready to drop in the next 24 months. So we need to get some of the younger employees trained up, and, the long-term employees that are going to remain with us, trained on how to be a control center operator.
Is there a certification that comes with this or anything, or it's just now they understand the equipment type of thing?
It's just a knowledge base. We do have a training program, and based on your knowledge, you gain, with the bargaining unit employees, they do gain, it's basically steps in their process.
Training.
Yeah. Yes, Commissioner.
We call her Carly.
It's okay, last night someone called me Jennifer. I have a question for Ramona. How many contracts do we have with Siemens? I feel like we approve a lot of different, their scope of work is broad.
Right. We have a big long-term maintenance agreement with Siemens, and from time to time, you'll see that come with additional amendments and changes and things like that. We've got this long-term training agreement, and so there's different types of change orders and things like that you'll see as it relates to particularly Unit 5, because they're the original equipment manufacturer of that
So
unit.
they do the equipment, but they also obviously help us with HR and doing things like this. We're training, which would fall, even though it's for the equipment, it would fall under the people part. So we have a lot of different contracts with them. It's not exclusive to just one area of the industry.
If it pertains to the particular unit, and because they're the original equipment manufacturer and they can work on the unit, repairs, all types of things. So you'll see multiple contracts with Siemens.
There's lots of them.
Yeah.
We gained an additional, 60 megawatts out of a recent project? Correct. So that was one of them. They've made some upgrades to that unit, and we've gained some capacity and some efficiency, and so some of those are the ones you're remembering.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are related to the original equipment, just in the process of running the unit, but some of those yielded big results, so that it was a good investment.
Yeah, it's not a criticism, I'm just curious. I
Yeah,
just feel
and
like.
I think there's only 24 units, I think, like Unit 5 in the
Okay.
world, so
And they're the
we're one of
experts.
them.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of,
That's good to know too, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was very interesting.
Yeah.
What about on the RICE? What do we have for training built into that?
They can answer that probably better than any of us, but there's
We
a lot of
actually
training.
have, I think it's 10 weeks of training off-site, some of which will be in Augsburg on our specific engine, and then there's other training that'll be held off-site down in Fort Lauderdale. We have 10 weeks of training, which will train up several guys to be able to work on the maintenance of the engine. And then as far as the project goes, is that we have enough slots to where all the operators will be able to attend Siemens training specifically for our engines on-site for us.
Great, wonderful.
And they're working on a long-term maintenance agreement with MAN right now.
yeah, that's the next
Okay.
thing that you'll see. So similar to what we have with Siemens,
Yeah.
we'll have a long-term maintenance agreement with MAN.
Awesome.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much, Commissioner Kraft. All right. The audience, mayors, the members of the commission, so what do we want to share? Anything this morning on any items?
Back to school. Everybody be careful. LPD was out at LHS.
Anything to share? Okay, thank you. All right, then we are adjourned.